Wanted to make sure that everybody knows that we did vote to send the budget to the town meeting last Thursday, the 16th of April. But there was an important development between Wednesday and Tuesday that I want to make sure people are aware of. And first, let me mention that there is a revised PowerPoint slide presentation that reflects the changes that were finally approved on Wednesday, as well as the detailed traditional columnar format of the budget. They're both available in Sheila's office in hard copy and online on the town website under Town Budget. Now, the reason that we had to make changes between Tuesday and Wednesday is that on Wednesday afternoon, going back through the revenues in detail, it came to our attention that we would receive an additional $200,000 less in state grant revenue. So we needed to, at that point then, in order to maintain the budget integrity, make further reductions. The two most notable reductions are that we took the selectmen's contingency from $575 down to $500. We made a decision to take out the $75,000 that had been set aside for software, for new financial software. In light of the fact that we now have an opening in both the superintendent's office for the town of Winchester and the finance director's position, we thought it best to get those folks in their chairs, get a real agreement in place, and then take another look at what it makes sense so that we have a common platform among those entities. We also, after taking note of usage, particularly in police overtime, that Chief Scannell is running at a rate of about $320,000 this year because he does have 3 openings, open slots that are approved. His anticipation is he's starting the hiring process, and worst case, he would be at that number again next year. So we took their budget down from 385 down to, or 365 down to 320. We made other adjustments based on usage, but the bottom line is we kept the structural integrity of what we presented on Wednesday. Most importantly, there is $600,000 in a capital investment in our roads. Additionally, there's another $150,000 in operating materials in the highway department budget. We have a firm commitment as a group to getting the roads repaired, getting the potholes fixed, and making it possible for people to travel around Winstead safely. We also honored our capital expenditure commitment for public safety, specifically a new car, as Chief Scannell requested an additional car, and the Hearst tool for car wrecks, as Chief Shopey requested. We are continuing to get our financial house in order. We kept the $300,000 pension contribution from the taxpayers. And again, I'll mention that at the end of last week, the Connecticut Attorney General announced that they have come to a conclusion with Mr. Centrella. We will be receiving his cash payments into the town budget back, which is a little under $100,000. And we will also be able to adjust the town's pension obligation down for what would have been paid out to Mr. Centrella had he successfully retired as an employee of the town of Winchester. That's estimated at this point to be about another $300,000, basically addition to the town pension fund, which puts us back on track given that we had missed almost $800,000 in payments. Again, we have no headcount increases in this budget, but we will be meeting all of our contractual obligations to our employees. And we are, again, repaying the fiduciary accounts from the monies received from water and sewer. And again, those monies are represented in the following fashion. They are represented in the balance sheet of the town, not in effectively the income or cash flow statement of the budget. Currently on the town's balance sheet, we carry about $3.2 million of an IOU from the water and sewer department to the town. And on the other side of the ledger, we have an IOU to various fiduciary accounts, the Soldiers Monument being the most readily noticeable. And as we receive money from water and sewer, so the IOUs that we hold convert from IOUs to cash, we'll be able to take that cash and pay off the IOUs on the other side of the ledger. Kevin Nelligan, the town attorney, is working to put together exactly where we stand with each of those accounts and what the likely commitment and timing requirements are. But as I mentioned during last week's budget discussions, we will at the very least be at least starting to put as soon as possible $25,000 back into the Soldiers Monument Fund. They are first on the list to have their funding returned to them. Again, we as a group decided that the important thing here is to make a commitment to fix people's roads, To the extent that we ask for a capital or a tax increase of roughly $625,000, we can say hand over heart that all of that money is going to roads, and that in addition, we will also focus on getting economic development up and running in the town of Winchester. And with that, I'm going to ask Glenn to...
Yeah, I just want to restate what Marcia just ended up with. This board remains committed to growing our grand list. And we have allocated $50,000 towards that end. We ask that the community give us an opportunity to formulate that strategy, to bring in the people that we feel are going to move, that money forward in the best light, and include everybody, EDC, board members here, anybody else that has suggestions as to how to, most effectively spend that money. But we do want to make sure everyone understands that that's a commitment that we've made. We will grow this year's grand list.
And I just want to echo that and say that we have for several years put $5,000 or so in a couple of really eager and thoughtful volunteers' hands, but those little seeds have not borne enough fruit, quite frankly, to grow the town. And in a presentation made by Dick Labick, the chair of EDC, was specifically asked if we had $50,000, what would you do? He said we should look for outside help and we should make an incentive-based program to try to bring others into town. And that is precisely what we look forward to doing, and we look forward to working with Dick and his whole team to put this in place. And with that, I'll move on to, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
That's okay. Yeah, I have some questions because most of the budget was put together last week when we were gone, and I've gone through some of it, but not all of it. But I am interested in what you just said in terms of, you mentioned there was a significant development from Tuesday to Wednesday in terms of revenue. And
Yes.
Was that revenue because the state cut something, or was that revenue that because you had counted it in the wrong way in terms of a grant account versus what came to us or went to?
Thank you for bringing that up, because it raises another issue with the current year's budget. We had recorded a couple of different grant revenue numbers that were moving around. They changed from March 28th to early April. Additionally, we received clarification from Dale. We were using the ECS money number that was provided by CCM, and in fact that included the Alliance grant money in that number. It wasn't footnoted on that page, but once we knew that, we took that out. I think it's also important to note, and thank you for raising this, we also identified that there was about $80,000 in revenue identified as coming in through the employee medical contributions, which we will not be receiving. And in fact, it's an $80,000 hole that exists in the current budget. So Dale will be coming back to us later in May with proposals for how we're going to manage that exposure, what line item transfers we might need in order to cover that. So yes, there were some swings in terms of revenues, and I would also say that there is still the possibility, because the state budget, this is a perennial issue, the state budget is not finalized till early June, literally I think a day or so after we usually vote. There still can be other changes up and until that time, so we're trying to use the most current numbers. I think the critical thing is that we did, I think as a group, sit with Dale and go through line by line all of the numbers, and I think we're all in sync and understand sort of where we are now.
Well, from that standpoint too, Dale, hopefully I can find some time to meet with you Thursday to go through the budget so that I can catch up to that. Because one of the things I want to know too is on the roads, based on numbers in terms of $600,000 to repair roads. Is it 600 or is it augmented by other money that you had planned in there?
Well, there's $600,000 in the capital improvement plan for roads, and then within the highway budget, there's another 130 of materials. So it's everything from gravel to stone to bituminous concrete.
Is there a plan on specific roads? Because I know that, I don't know if the numbers have changed, but I always was told that to do a mile of road was about $800,000. So 600,000 plus the 150 would be that, or is this more for the, I know Neil had talked about doing some of the drainage work to get roads ready for repair, or is this planned to specifically do specific roads, or?
Well, there's two parts to this puzzle. The first is that we have specifically asked Neil before he leaves on May 9th, and it's something that he is committed to doing, to coming up with a schedule for the spring into the summer for the highway crew, literally a by-road schedule of where they'll be cleaning brush, cleaning drainage, and patching and repairing the pothole damage that exists around town. And that's supposed to be in place and starting now. The second part of this puzzle in terms of where we go with a broader program, I mean, I get it that $600,000 isn't going to repair, isn't going to dig up and repair and change the camber on a lot of roads, but it will actually provide us with a basis for dealing with drainage issues, as you identified, properly filling these roads, and in some cases, putting on a skim coat if we need to. But the key part of that process is really in Dale's hands at this point. He needs to, and we talked about this a little bit today, he's on schedule to start looking for a public works director that has the experience and the management capabilities to put in place a road program that basically starts to repair the damage that we've had. So we need to have a public works director first put in place, and from that person we'll be able to then sit down after they've already started the clearing and patching to decide next steps.
Well, now that you mentioned the Public Works Director, I was going to do this later, but we do have somebody that could do that. The fact that a lot of you, we just got a water and sewage analysis from him that shows some revenue for the town and that, and some of the other projects that he's brought in all year. So I don't know if anybody has, in the past week or so, found a way to maybe keep Mr. Amwick here. I know that he has done a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous amount of analysis on roads, on everything as we see. So I know that there are people that thought that he was doing a good job. So
Well,
I don't know if we can, but.
I will say this. Mr. Amwick resigned. He wasn't fired. He wasn't pushed. He went of his own volition. I don't know why he resigned. He hasn't shared those thoughts with me. But I will make this following factual observation, that Mr. Amwick's budget request was for a $100,000 deputy with road experience to do $200,000 worth of road repairs. We as a group made a decision not to add to the head count and instead dedicate a much larger number to actually fixing the roads. So that's the program we have announced and embarked on. Public Works got the largest increase both in salary, benefits, and in materials. And Mr. Amwick has made the choice that he's made. We're still committed to getting the roads fixed, and we will find, I'm confident that Dale will find a good person that will put the program together and that we will get the roads fixed.
And then I just have one more question on the financial software, because financial software has been something that we've talked about for a long time, and while I understand that the Board of Education is hiring a new superintendent, that's not going to happen for a while. And one of the things that had occurred in all of our ledgers and whatnot was the financial software. And, in talking with Robin, who I believe had talked to some vendors, and we had talked to vendors a few years ago about the same kind of thing, upgrading software and whatnot. It seems to be one of our basic needs here in terms of being able to have reports that are much more automated and detailed from what we currently have in terms of things. Like I know where I work, there's a software package that's incredibly detailed and runs a lot of good reports for people to work off of. So I know that you said that you weren't going to do it in this year, but I think it's something that we really need to do at some point in time.
I don't disagree, but I think it's important for us to have the people in place that are actually going to implement that, and we need to have their input in terms of the program. I would also note that the town very much wants the school district and the town to be on one platform. They voted for that by a multiple 2 or 3 years ago. So we absolutely need that commitment before we make that kind of investment in another program or system. I will also say that I had a chance with Dale to talk with the staff that actually manage our purchasing department and our data software, and they're quite comfortable waiting until all those people are in place. In fact, they want to, because they'd like to have all those people in place, since they, at the end of the day, are ultimately responsible for making sure this stuff all fits together and works. They want to have the right people in place above them so that they know that they have a system that they can maintain that makes sense.
It's just that we would have to wait to get to the next budget cycle over a year and a couple months to do that.
Well, we'll see. You know, our cash flow situation is such that if the Water and Sewer Department, which is planning on paying us the full 400, if that actually materializes over the next 2 years, and some other things continue to work in our favor, and we manage the budget tightly, there's no reason that we might not, out of the Selectmen's contingency, have the opportunity to still proceed with this, particularly if we have an agreement with the school district and we're splitting the cost. I'm just saying that from a taxpayer's perspective, given that we have so many openings and open questions, it doesn't make sense to ask the taxpayers to put up that money at this point and warehouse it until all those positions are in place and we have more clarity.
I guess I'll have to look at the contingency more, because I know most of the contingency, I did notice quickly that you changed the contingency from fund balance contingency to selectmen's contingency. And the fund balance was a commitment to grow, obviously, the fund balance and whatnot. Whereas when it's in contingency, then we could use it for different things, like you mentioned, the economic development and maybe the software. So I think I would like to see us be more specific in terms of how much of that contingency is going to go to the fund balance, so we could be assured of that. And also the 400,000, well, a little bit less from water and sewer, in terms of where that cash is going to go. I know it doesn't count on the ledgers in this year and whatnot, but I think we need to, again, if you're talking about the taxpayers, be very clear about where these line items are going to go to, because we hear that over and over and over again in terms of where, you know, you budgeted it here and then you've moved it here. And so I think that as we get this budget under control and moving, as you say, that we really identify how much of that contingency is going to go in the fund balance.
And I think, to just clarify, the policy that's accepted is to grow to a certain level by a date certain. It was not a dollar certain contribution by a date certain. And again, given the cash flow coming in from water and sewer, and the fact that you're absolutely right, we need to have clarity from Kevin in terms of what the due to and due froms are and how we need to pay those off. There is going to be an opportunity to, and again, tightly control the budget. There is going to be an opportunity within the Selectmen's contingency to both appropriately grow the fund balance, make economic investments, and make better choices. There's definitely the ability to do that if we all keep our eye on it. But I absolutely agree. We need to get clarity from Kevin in terms of those due tos and due froms. We need to see the money come in from water and sewer, and then we need to be very clear with the public where that money is going. Absolutely. Any other questions? Okay.
So I need an authorization to proceed to try to put the loan together, and then I would request that you let us know that there is a subcommittee to look at the credit worthiness, so that however we have to proceed on that, we can hit those milestones and tell EPA what we're doing.
Okay. Are there any more questions or comments? Do you want to?
No, I just echo what Glenn said, because at that point, it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago, we were in danger, well, 4 years or so ago, we're in danger of losing the whole fund. At that point, when we found you.
And if we do this, we'll have $480,000 eventually that gets paid back that we can use again. If you use $300 for Iflin, $100 for Whiting, and $80 for Carriage Maker, which
Yes.
is we need that, obviously, in terms of what we have. So I would ask for a motion to authorize Art Bogan to proceed with the loan process.
I make that motion.
Okay, George makes a motion. May I have a second?
I'll second that.
Glenn seconds. All those in favor? Unanimous. Now, I think he also would like us to set up the subcommittee tonight to do the credit work.
Or as you need to. It doesn't need to take your time tonight.
Okay, well,
But as soon as we can have that, that would be helpful.
well, I think we can do it right here. How many, you two were on it before, I don't know if you have time to do it now, if you want to do it again. Candy is saying yes. Candace would like to join, and I am happy to be on it because I'd like to learn the process. So it'll be Candy, Candace, and Marcia will be the credit.
The Halliburton Bridge, Halliburton Avenue Bridge milling proposal is due on Thursday. Mr. Emwick is keeping that project moving forward, hopefully for a speedy conclusion. With regard to economic development and planning, I'd like to invite more of the business owners to attend the monthly meeting of the Merchants Association. Those are held on the second Wednesday of every month at Whiting Mills at 8 o'clock a.m. And as it stands now, very few, if any, business owners show up. This group was started by Dick Labick. It's currently run by Mr. Bob Bailey of the Health Food Corner and Sandy Evans of Whiting Mills. And their extraordinary efforts are being overlooked or being underutilized. So I would encourage business owners throughout the town, not just downtown, to look into attending these meetings. It's critical that they get the business perspective on things that need to be improved. As we discussed briefly a meeting or two ago, I have received some proposed prices for Lot 11 in the industrial park. Several other realtors came to a general consensus of the price, so I'll be talking with the party that was the least interested and figuring out how to proceed with that. But I do have 4 different realtors that have recommended a price range, so we'll start with that. So we'll figure out how to move forward with that.
To be clear, you're going to talk to the party that is interested. I think
Correct.
I heard least interested. No.
That is interesting.
It is
yes.
interested.
The Planning Commission approved amendments to zoning regulations to support additional downtown redevelopment last week. These changes include higher building heights, closer street setbacks, allowing the buildings to be built closer to the streets to match the current downtown, and reducing the off-street parking requirements. The Planning and Zoning Commission also has some cooperative training scheduled for tomorrow night with the Zoning Board of Appeals. There's a land use attorney that's going to come in and help advise on the roles and responsibilities of land use boards. There's a Downtown Revitalization Institute on Friday that I will be attending with Chairman Mr. Mike Peacock of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And as Mr. Bogan said, and as I informed you, we have received the $100,000 municipal brownfield assessment inventory grant that will support environmental assessment of the proposed Dunkin' Donuts site as well as the Lambert K site. With regard to other governmental activities, I'd like to say thank you to Senator Murphy for his visit to town last week, and specifically to Sterling Sinterd. The town meeting is scheduled for Monday, May 5th at the Gilbert School Auditorium. Civil Service Commission is working to post the announcements for several job openings. Working with the town attorney to address the previously voiced concerns regarding satellite dishes, and also working with him to address some dated language in the fire department contracts between the Winstead Fire Department and the Winchester Fire Department. We've been meeting with both Chief Marchand and Chief Shopee on how to clarify some language that hasn't been updated in decades, so that's ongoing as well. Working with the Elm Street property owner to address the parking lot concerns, and with the RRDD1 representatives and Public Works for the possibility of the spring cleanup. Some of the documents that I handed you this evening include a report on the status of the 2012-2013 audit. That's from Mr. Chris King. I received that today. He estimates roughly that they received about 25% of the data for the 12-13 audit, and they will continue to work on that as well. Also attached to that is a letter of engagement for King & King to perform the 2013-14 audit, which is the year we're currently in. This would be the 3rd year of the original 3-year contract, and I expect that I will bring the letter of engagement, which you at least have a copy of tonight. I'll bring it to you at the May 19th meeting, as well as the new auditing or accounting manual provides for 1 3-year extension for an auditing firm. So I expect that with the additional recommendation of the interim finance director, and if need be, Robin, we will recommend the 1 3-year extension to go forward with King & King for another 3 years because of the effort that they've made in untangling everything, that it would really set us back to yet again have to bring in another auditor. So both of those issues will be on the May 19th meeting. We'll skip the May 5th mainly because that's the town meeting. And the last document presented to you was a financial report from the interim finance director, Ms. Cindy Rhines. This was her first work at it, so if you have some questions, and I've already gone over a few of them with the mayor, but please look it over. If you have any questions, share them with me so I can get some answers from from Ms. Rhines, and we'll keep on moving in the right direction. With regard to various community events, the Winstead Youth Baseball opening ceremonies, to which you are all invited, is scheduled for Friday evening at 6 o'clock at the youth ball fields on Willow Street. National Day of Prayer service is at East End Park at noon on Thursday, May 1st. And somewhat further out, the annual Rotary Pet Parade's on Saturday, May 17th, and the annual Memorial Day Parade is on Monday, May 26th. So pending any questions from you, that's all that I have for you this evening.
In regard to the audit, it's only 25%, so what is projected completion date?
I signed another extension today for, the OPM only authorizes 30-day extensions, so that's the end of May. I think we're aggressively looking at the end of July. The long-term goal is to get completely back on cycle with all of our audits by the end of this calendar year. If we can get the 12-13 audit finished and then the 13-14 audit finished by this December, we will be back on the regular cycle, and so that's what we're shooting for.
So now that the treasurer is no longer working for us, he was helping with the audit, is that correct?
He wasn't helping as much as Miss Rhines was.
Right.
So Miss Rhines, that's, now that she's helped me help put the budget to bed with you, her focus is pretty much entirely focused now on the audit.
Is there anyone else we can bring on board to help with the audit?
We've started talking with Miss Rhines to find out, what kind of additional help on a kind of part-time or as-needed basis we can bring in to help.
So would you be able to get back to us at the next meeting as to what her recommendations are?
Yep.
Okay, great.
How realistic does King and King think the July deadline is?
I think when Robin was here, it was very realistic. I think it's going to be an interesting thing to see how much that sets us back.
Is it really a timing issue? I mean, sorry, a staffing issue of just more people, or is there some other issue?
No, I think it's mainly the staffing issue.
Staffing.
Which is why we had Cindy come on board in the first place to start to help. I did talk with Cindy about some additional help, and we'll see what we can bring on board and what the budget can sustain.
Okay, well, to the extent you want to post this all obviously in advance of either the 5th or the 19th, please feel free to let us know sort of how that's progressing.
Okay.
Thanks. Any other questions, Glenn?
Yeah, Dale, do we have Robin's position posted anywhere yet?
It was posted on Connecticut Conference of Municipalities website, as well as the Government Finance Officer's website, which were the two places, at least the two places it was posted last time when we hired Robin.
Okay, and are we thinking about anywhere else besides those two?
We're open to any other discussions. I've also approached several executive search firms just on an informal basis of steering us. I've talked to Chris King, so a lot of it is informal discussion. If you have any recommendations of other places that you think might merit consideration, please share them with me as well.
So the timeline then for hiring somebody is just going to kind of evolve as far as based on the responses, is that correct?
The posting that went to the GFOA and the CCM website says that the job posting is open until May 23rd. So Civil Service Commission can't start their review of that until May 23rd.
Now that the treasurer's job is an open position as well, are there any opportunities to push that faster, that maybe they could help with the audit? Or are there any restrictions that we have on getting help with the audit?
No, we didn't have any problems when we found a qualified person to come in and help. The treasurer, the Civil Service Commission is taking a closer look at the job description for the treasurer to make sure that the job description over time may have morphed or changed here and there, and going back and revisiting the charter to make sure that the job description that we post matches or mirrors the charter requirements. So the treasurer position hasn't been posted yet. Civil Service Commission is slated to meet again this Thursday, but we want to make sure that the job position or job description we post for the treasurer
What we want.
marries the charter.
Yeah, and one of the issues I think we had was that over time it had decayed.
Correct.
Any other comments or questions? is the Hollabird Bridge. As Mr. Buddy Hazy mentioned, it was paved at the beginning of last week, and I want to thank Harwinton Paving for accommodating the schedule and moving it up so that we could get it done in advance of the rain. They also did an outstanding job. I also want to thank our DPW workers for prepping the site well. As some of you may know, we actually rented a milling machine, which Northwest Council of Governments has equipment we can rent at a very reasonable price to be able to complete the project. As was mentioned, we actually paved 5 areas in town, and they were all milled and then paved, and again, it was quite successful. The other thing I want to mention to people that is everybody's focused on the actual final repair and replacement of the bridge. The WMC folks submitted the final plans to the Connecticut Department of Transportation last Thursday. The DOT will now work with Army Corps to get it signed off on. It's important to understand that with Army Corps, it can be months, and it can be 1 month, 3 months, or longer. We can hope for the best, but we have to plan for the alternative, and I think, Dale, even you had expressed concern that it could take a while. But in my conversations with Mr. McDonald at WMC, given the nature of the repair to the deck and what was likely, again, we have to plan for the alternative, but he is optimistic that we could get approval this summer and be in a position to bid by early fall. So that would obviously be very good news for us to be able to get the bridge fixed, really fixed, and finally replaced. Having said that, I think the outside repair date could be as late as next summer, again, depending on Army Corps of Engineers. I don't know if anybody had any other comments or on Hollabird Bridge or the other paving projects. On the Main Street median, we have received questions about the status of completion, and I'm going to let Dale give us an update in terms of where we are with this.
It turns out that, talking to the engineer that we've retained to inspect that project indicates that he'd been working for, it's held up with the pole removal for the streetlights. And CL&P had informed them that they were going to remove the pole at least 3 weeks ago, but the engineer from Leonard Engineering has not had a response since then. I moved things up the ladder at CL&P this morning, and later this morning I signed the actual work order to remove the street lights, and the CL&P sent me an email that said the work orders have all been written and operations will begin removing the street lights shortly. I'll keep you posted if we have any other concerns or questions. So hopefully that'll get started later this week, next week at the earliest.
Glenn?
Dale, as part of the project, there was some brickwork, I think, in front of the Y. Was that ever completed?
No, that's all, they actually have to do the poles, and then they'll do the bricks around the
Okay,
poles.
so
So everything is contingent on the poles.
Okay. And does that wrap it up after the brickwork is?
Correct. Although I have not seen the full punch list from Waters Construction yet. So we sent an email today asking for that punch list.
Thank you.
Again, just like with the bridge, I think it's important for the citizens of Winstead that we complete projects. It's also very important from the state's perspective when we receive significant funding that we actually complete the projects and report them as complete. So I appreciate the town manager following up on this so that we can get this in the completed list. In favor? Unanimous? Next, line item D is the resolution for the Main Street Investigation Grant. This is for making Whiting Street one-way.
You have before you a series of documents that indicate the instructions for the grant, the purpose of the grant. Basically, it's seeking, we can seek up to $500,000 for a town-owned piece of property to support the state's efforts for brownfields, reuse of existing facilities, redevelopment of areas with existing infrastructure, affordable housing, and the components of complete streets. So this is a reincarnation of what was previously presented as a steep grant to support the efforts of Whiting Mills and the American Mural Project. The grant application is due May 30th. As I've discussed with the mayor, I am in the process of securing new, up-to-date, or current letters of support instead of utilizing the ones that were from 2 years ago. I did include one in the packet from the owners of Whiting Mills. The discussions with the mayor, and I think we've had discussions before as part of the steep grant, is that this project will not move forward until the Halliburton project is done. And I need to be clear on that the timeline, I have to present a timeline when I submit the budget, or the application. And that application timeline will indicate that before any of this moves forward, the Halliburton project will be completed before any of it moves forward. It may necessitate, or it will necessitate engineering fees, because we need to do a better job of designing our streets so that they last longer, especially if we're going to invest more money in them. So we will have to retain an engineer. Engineering costs are not allowed as part of the $500,000 application. So if we get notice that we do get the award, we will have to consider putting in next year's budget, not the one that's going to be voted on yet, but the budget after that, putting in a sufficient line for engineering fees. And we will go out for bids or proposals for engineers to design drainage and the paving and all the components of the grant application. But again, the key point is that this project will not move forward until the Halliburton project is completed. So that could be, as far out as 2016.
So this is a 15-16 really request, and I will be candid, I am concerned with sending in a grant application that is binding the town to pay for engineering fees, which we haven't had a proper vote on to approve in terms of proceeding with the project. And I personally think that we should not put grants forward that require the town to spend money unless that money is actually in a budget and we can point to it and say that we know we have to spend this money and we have the money to spend. It's just proper policy and budgeting to do that from a finance board perspective. Candy.
Yeah, well, I know that we always would like to be able to do that, but in order to, then any grant that came forward with any matching amount in the next year would not be able to move, because you wouldn't be able to do anything until next May at this time. So any grant between now and then that would require money in the budget, whether it was going to be for next year or the year after, we would never be able to vote on any.
You actually raise a really interesting question, because the deadline for submitting this is May 30th. I believe it was contemplated when the program was created that the line items that are required, like engineering, to be paid for would be in next year's budget, the 14-15 budget. And I find it quite curious that this is coming up literally a week and a half before we vote for the budget, and yet the line item was never suggested earlier in the spring in terms of including it in the budget.
Okay, well, I guess, okay, I get all that, but I'm asking you now then, so if any grant comes forward between now and next year's budget that requires any part of matching for us, then the answer would be we can't apply now because we need to wait until we formulate the next year's budget.
Well, we would have more time than 5 minutes to decide that we're actually going to include it in a budget. This has not been introduced in a manner such that the community's had a chance to understand that this project will cost $50,000 for the town. It is not free. And this is exactly how we've started other projects, and it's how we've gotten into trouble in terms of overspending. And when we get to later on in this evening's discussion, it's going to become apparent that, in fact, we're short almost $300,000 in the current year for revenue. So, and we're going to have to make adjustments to account for that. So it's just not smart policy from a finance board perspective to proceed with something that requires a significant expenditure. $50,000 is a significant expenditure potentially on the part of the town that hasn't been properly discussed, vetted, and there was an opportunity to get this in the current budget. It just didn't happen on a timely basis because the process has been ongoing, I believe, to ask for approvals from the various underlying boards. And this should have been brought to the Board of Selectmen's attention in terms of the budgeting literally 6 to 8 weeks ago.
Oh, okay, that's fine, but that's not my question. That's not my point. My point is that it will be the policy of this board, based on what you're saying, that any grant, whether the merits of the grant or any grant comes forward in the next year, that we're all sitting here, that requires a matching fund that is not in the budget, we will turn down.
No, what I'm saying is that we're not going to decide to spend $50,000 that the town hasn't committed to in a budget in 5 minutes.
And please, let me clarify again. The town is not being committed to $50,000. I indicated that we would have to go out for bids for engineering fees. It could be $10,000, and we're not committing to it. Number one, we have to see if the grant is awarded. If the grant is awarded and we go out for bids for engineering and the engineering fees come in at $120,000, I'd be the first one to stand in front of you and say, no, we're going to reject the grant because it's out of line for the benefit to the town. But if the grant comes in at $10,000 for engineering fees, that's $500,000 to support economic development in the town. That the governor is basing his economic development strategy on arts and culture. So the town is not committed to anything at this point.
The wording of these grants specifically requests matching funds to pay for engineering for the town. The wording is very clear. This grant detail has been up online for months. So this is not, Candy, to your point, we're going to say no to everything that comes forward because we'll have time to consider it. In this case, we are finding out at the 11th hour, being asked to approve something that has a potential $50,000 plus commitment for the town in a future budget that has not been discussed and not been properly vetted. And there was time to discuss this, but it hasn't been brought forward till this evening. It wasn't disclosed until we received this one-page cover request with our Board of Selectmen packets in the last couple days.
And again, if there's no interest in getting $500,000 for the town, then I ask that you just withdraw this from consideration.
George?
This subject of the Whiting Mill and that whole area of the community where the community colleges and the state has invested a lot of money in the expansion of the school, that whole side of the town, if this grant is awarded to the town, I think that is an important step forward to solidify what is now a developing reason for people to come to this community, which is a huge EDC focus. And with what Whiting Mills has done and has improved over there, and then with the Wall of America, if that in fact is going to get off the ground, and I believe it will, this will finish that part of the town with regards to the infrastructure. And I think that what Dale's talking about, and I agree with him, if we don't get awarded the grant, then we don't get awarded the grant. But I think this first step, and we have talked about it for a couple of years as far as a steep grant application in that area as well. So I would think it's important to go ahead and do this, and we are not, as Dale just said, we're not committed to $50,000, and it's something that we would then be able to bring into the next budget.
I will repeat, these state grants require that when the town submits it, they understand that they will be providing the money for engineering. We are being asked to spend money that's not in the budget and has not been contemplated. It's not appropriate as a policy matter to ask the board on very short notice to decide to spend money that is not in a budget and has not been discussed.
And let me, again, clarify. There's nothing in the grant application that says we have to have engineering fees already set aside. Absolutely nothing.
But we ultimately are responsible for them, so it is an expense that the town has to bear.
Correct. And I would agree that if the engineering fees are $10,000 to get $500,000, it's well worth that expense.
We don't know what the engineering fees will be, and more importantly, it's a future expense that we don't have in any budget at this point in time, and it's not an amount of money that anyone will be binding the town to spend money on engineering. It's important for us when we apply for these grants to be clear about what our obligations are and to understand as a finance board what we are committing people to. I would actually ask that we move to vote on whether we proceed with this application and provide a resolution. Glenn?
Dale, if we were awarded the $500,000, would it, is it enough money to complete the work that we want to do?
That would depend on what the engineering estimate says.
So
I have a budget estimate in front of you that was done in 2012 that does account for the project. Now, as I indicated, that I would get updated budget numbers, before we move forward with the grant application. So if it doesn't complete it, then the grant application doesn't get submitted, or we only submit it for the $500,000 is the maximum allowable grant.
Again, we shouldn't embark on something that we don't actually know the true cost of, and we don't know the financial implications for the town's own expenses.
Just one last point. And I mean, I can understand both sides of this, but I just want to be clear going forward, that if things are not budgeted, then we're not going to move forward with them in the next.
We don't spend money that's not in a budget. If this had come forward on a timely basis, we could have considered putting the $50,000 in the budget. It didn't come forward on a timely basis. It's not in the budget. The whole reason the grant process has a May 30th deadline is because it was contemplated that towns would have their match in their budget. This is no different than the ambulance. We're not going to do that again.
Okay, that's fine, but I'm just wanting you, I guess I'm just looking for that anything coming forward that is not in this budget, we will not spend money on. Which will be fine, because there are some things that were in the budget slides that were not in the budget that are being contemplated. So I just want to make sure that we're not going to do that.
We are going to be spending the money as it was described in the budget slides, and that's described in the budget. So yes, there's $600,000 for roads, if that's your question.
No, that's not my question.
Dan?
Can we table this?
You can if you want. But you said the grant application is due May 30th. This is the last regularly scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting. Before then, if you want to call a special, again, you can throw it in the hopper if you want.
And
Go ahead.
if we vote on yes on this, this doesn't lock us into it. It depends on the engineer prices, and if it comes out outrageous, we can choose to.
It doesn't lock you into anything.
Okay.
All it says is, I have the authority, based upon your approval, to submit a grant application. Over the next 2 weeks, as I get some of those additional costs, if it looks like it's going to cost $1.6 million to do Whiting Street, I won't submit the application.
But this still wouldn't be in this budget. It'll be in next year.
Correct. Even, let's say I submit it and say that, okay, the engineering costs have yet to be determined. By the time, if we're going to do this after Halliburton Bridge is done, then those engineering costs would be included in next year's proposed budget that we haven't even started to develop yet. And if they're too high, then we throw it out.
But again, submitting grant applications like this to the state, you're committing as a town and as a board to say that you understand you bear the matching costs, and you agree to that.
Actually, there are no matching costs in this.
You agree
it's a
to pay the
straight grant.
engineering.
Right. Engineering costs are not covered, but there are no matching costs associated with this grant.
I was merely using the wording that's provided in the cover.
Right. It can be considered as matching because if you put matching grants toward it, it improves the attractiveness of the state wants you to put some skin in the game.
Yes, they want us to spend money that's not in our budget. Jorge?
I see both points. I see exactly where Marcia's coming from, and I see where you're coming from. But we're forgetting a really big part of this whole conversation is the people that pay the taxes for this budget. I mean, we're talking about $50,000. I don't think that this is something that we should have feedback from everyone else and see how they feel about it as well. It shouldn't just be, oh, let's go ahead and do this. I personally think that Whiting Mills would be something nice to do. It'd be great. It's a great project, but obviously the timing hasn't been very, very well. However, I can see where Dale's coming from in regards to turning down $500,000. Doesn't really make much sense. If it's true that you say that we can apply for this and not commit to it, where if it come out to be too much, we can always go back. If that's true, I don't see why we don't go through with this. However, if going through with this and applying and we get it, and then we're committed to these costs, that's a major problem that we should be aware of. I mean, that's something that makes it or breaks it to me at least.
We are committing to pay the engineering costs. That is part of this grant application.
I have a question. In the budget, on the Board of Selectmen contingency line, because you took it off the fund balance contingency line, you put 50,000 for economic development in the Board of Selectmen contingency. And at the time when it was put there, there was not a specific activities under economic development. How could this be considered economic development?
We are looking to bring more businesses and more jobs into town. Making Whiting Street one-way and pretty will not bring more jobs or more businesses into town. I also want to, it's ancillarily making a part of town that has that has economic value. Again, making Whiting Street one-way and pretty does not bring and does not sustain economic growth. It doesn't add to the grand list of the town. I'm not saying this isn't a good project. I'm not saying it's not something we should pursue. I just think it was not done in the right way, and it's too early. We should focus on getting the Halliburton Bridge done, and then once that is finished, we can pursue a project like this when we've had a chance to properly have everybody know what the true costs are for both the town and the project itself. Jorge?
I think we should table this and attend to it quickly, maybe the same week. I think the citizens should have a say in their opinion about this, since a lot of it has to do with tax money. $50,000, not just us seven paying the $50,000.
But again, I think some very misleading information is being put out with the keep quoting the $50,000. We don't know what that cost is.
I'm sorry, I mean just that cost.
Yes, understand what the engineering cost is.
The estimated cost for such plans is approximately $50,000. I'm reading your request to the selectmen.
Right. That's
That
an
isn't
appro-
that isn't a misleading statement, that's your statement.
But I say approximately, and I say we're not committed to that, but it's keep being repeated that we're committed to that. We are not committed to it.
We're committed to pay the
I
engineering
think we should
fees.
table this. I think we should move forward.
Okay, do I have a motion to table?
I'll make a motion to table, please.
Do I have a second on the motion to table?
Second?
Kenny seconds. All those in favor of tabling this?